On the News Channel 5 network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. Tennessee Legislature is 6 weeks into its second and final session. The deadline to introduce legislation has passed. We've had thousands of new bills tossed into the hopper. So it's get down to business time on the Hill for lawmakers to see what they will pass or won't approve this year outside of an operating budget, which they have to do for the state constitution. What will happen for the remainder of the 111th Tennessee General Assembly? We invited two of the top journalists covering this session to join us and talk about it on Inside Politics this week. They are TENNESSEAN Capitol Hill reporter Joel Ebert and Kim Kruesi, the legislative reporter for the Associated Press. Joel, welcome back to the show. Kim, this is your first time with us, so
yes,
welcome.
Thank you.
How do you assess the session so far? Second year in a row, no need to organize this time, so you thought they'd hit the ground running, but it doesn't seem a lot of legislation is being passed outside of the controversy over the adoption bill with the LGBT issues. Is it quiet up there this year?
I think that's the start of every session, right? It has this sort of slow pace at the beginning and then rush towards the middle and end.
Yeah.
This year it's kind of interesting because it does seem like there's a lot of these sort of social issues popping up again because there is no overarching theme so far. Like a couple of years ago we saw Governor Bill Haslam propose a gas tax increase. We're not seeing a major idea like that. So there are kind of things like the Bible bill being reintroduced.
Kim, last year we had this turmoil with the Nathan Bedford Forrest bus, which we have again this year, but we also had the David Byrd situation, the efforts to oust him. We had the school voucher bill, which was one of the big issues last time, barely passed, still controversy about it. Then towards the end we had this controversy with Speaker Cassada that ultimately led to him resigning from his position. Last year was your first year, this is your second. It might seem because of that turmoil being gone. There were protests all the time up on the Hill. I don't see those as much this year. Is it gotten a lot more tranquil?
Well, yes and no. I think that last year there was a lot more attention on the legislative leadership and how that was impacting the flow and the tone of the session. And this year we are a lot more, it's election year, and so we have a lot more attention on what sort of bills lawmakers are hoping will be the shiny thing that'll be placed in front of their voters.
Speaking of leadership, we have a new speaker, Cameron Sexton. How is he adjusting and how are the members adjusting to him?
It's actually interesting. He's had some major policy changes that have been really kind of quiet, though. He's trying to update the workplace harassment policy. He's instituting a plan to eliminate what are these so-called pre-meetings, which were just essentially planning sessions. Exactly. So he quietly eliminated those. And overall, the tone of the session is not sort of this draconian experience that I think a lot of lawmakers and lobbyists and others felt it was under Speaker Cassada last year.
Kim, the old speaker is still there. He's seeking re-election. How is that impacting the session, particularly now since he still has a consulting firm and at least some lawmakers are using him for their re-election?
Well, it definitely gives some drama to
Is there a comeback there coming?
I mean, I think that the former Speaker Cassada has a long history of popping up inside the Tennessee House, and I think it shows that he's not going away anytime soon.
At the same time, he was one of the candidates that might run for a leadership position earlier this year. He didn't run, so that shows that maybe he is slipping in some support.
And he was placed as vice chair under a Democratic chairman, which I think is a blow if you think about it.
Putting him in his place a little bit from the new speaker. The Republican supermajority can do everything, including maybe have the sun rise in the other part of it, in the west instead of in the east. And there's been some signs of stress. I mean, one of the most interesting ones, although I don't think it's going to go anywhere, are a couple of Republicans who say, we really ought to expand our Medicaid program down here. We ought to decide we're going to be Obamacare, which has been about the dirtiest political word up on the Hill. Is that a sign of internal stress about this, or is anything going to come of that?
Well, I think given the governor's position, he has been adamantly against Medicaid expansion. You hear from both speakers of the House and the Senate. They're also against it. Unless there is a groundswell grassroots movement among lawmakers to buck their party leadership, it would be shocking to see that change right now.
And to date, we haven't seen that bill make much progress yet.
Kim, last year the big controversy we mentioned earlier was passing the voucher program. It looks like that those kind of education savings accounts, the governor wants to start them this year instead of next year. Is that likely to happen? I mean, it only passed by one vote in the House. There seems to be almost perhaps enough votes to override it in the House or change it in the House, repeal it in the House, but probably not in the Senate.
Well, maybe. So by all means, the governor, the Department of Education is on track to start this voucher program in the summer. The Senate Speaker McNally said they are not going to revisit that contract that is basically allowing this voucher program to go into place. And as well as the House Speaker has said he does not feel like there is enough votes to repeal and override a governor's veto. And
that's interesting. Well, that only takes 50 votes, so that's kind of interesting. But it's interesting that the new Speaker Sexton, is very much opposed to vouchers, yet he's not leading the fight to do anything to change it.
He's been very hands-off on it, of just saying, this is the law, let's move forward. He says that he's focused on other education initiatives.
And there's no indication that this outside firm they're using, even though it seems to be infuriating some lawmakers, they're not going to try to stop that or change that.
We asked that of Speaker McNally yesterday, and he indicated no, there is no plan to change it.
Another issue that seems to be dividing the Republican supermajority, perhaps even more than usual, at least dividing them from the governor, is the whole issue about refugees coming to Tennessee. Governor Lee, at the request of President Trump, has decided he wants to continue to have refugees come to Tennessee and be settled. But the lawmakers seem to be ready, at least in one of the bills, perhaps to try to take that power away from him.
I mean, this was definitely an issue at the beginning of the session that seemed to have a ton of air. It definitely is making its way through the State House, but I feel like it's been placed on the back burner as the voucher issue. Paid parental leave has kind of taken it, the front right now. But those bills are still moving through and have a lot of support inside the House.
Does the governor feel strongly enough about it? Because he had a very religious tone to this, as he's done on several issues. He looks at, if this passes, would he veto it?
It's going to be very interesting. Last year, the governor came out in the final day of the session, said he would not veto anything. If lawmakers do approve one of these measures that do sort of rebuke him, he's going to face sort of a dilemma. Do you stand up to these folks in a way he hasn't shown
when
yet?
It's so easy to override a veto, at least technically in Tennessee, although governors do better having their veto sustained than you'd think when it only takes a simple majority.
Well, and the timing. If he signs it at the very end of the session and the lawmakers adjourn, they're not going to hold a special session.
You think he might pocket veto it then?
He could.
Is there some sort of compromise on this? I mean, does it look like either side has a way to go? Either you want it or you don't. So there's no compromise.
I mean, I think from the governor's perspective, he basically said, I'm not going to touch your lawsuit. I'm bucking President Trump on this refugee issue. However, the legislature is currently in the middle of a pretty big lawsuit when it comes to allowing refugee resettlement in Tennessee, and I think from his angle is saying, hey, I am not getting in the middle of this.
And they've lost that lawsuit on every level of course.
On every level, but they are still pushing it up to the Supreme Court.
Kim Kruesi of the Associated Press is our guest, along with Joel Ebert of Tennessee. We're talking about the Tennessee General Assembly, the 111th General Assembly. They're in our 6th week so far, maybe 6 more weeks or so to go. Back to continue our conversation after this break.